Well, thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here with you all today in these very special and hallowed surroundings. A big thanks to Innovate Finance for inviting Google to participate today. What I'd like to do in the next 15 minutes is to share with you some of the opportunities, some of the potential business opportunities ahead of us with AI and generative AI. I would also like to touch on a really important aspect of this, which is approaching it in a way which is thoughtful and responsible. These new technologies are incredibly exciting for us all, but they need to be thoughtfully approached, particularly in an industry that is so consumer-focused and particularly one that is so highly regulated. Now, as we all know, there are major trends that are driving the need for digital transformation in financial services. I've been at Google Cloud for 3 years, but prior to that, I spent 23 years in industry as an executive and a board level. And we've been trying to digitally transform this industry for a very long time. Some of these things definitely have permeated through time, be that the industry economics, some of the cycles we've seen in the last couple of years, competitive dynamics, but also heightened digital expectations from consumers. Something that has driven the fintech sector to step up, to embrace these new technologies. Many of the companies here today do an incredible job of providing customer-centric experiences. I'm really enjoying the sessions today, getting to listen to different companies. We encourage you all to go to those booths and see some of those new experiences that are being developed. The reality is that many financial services that we work with, and I work with companies across the EMEA region, are trying to do this while they are still facing challenges within their business. Now, many of them come from tech stacks that aren't cloud native, that aren't the fintech native stacks, and they're working through many different data silos. Generali is a very famous insurance company who we work with in Italy. And we first started working with them, they had 23 different data centers, one for every product. They were very proud of that at the time. But actually, they have been on a journey with us over the last few years, and they have taken that data. They have brought it into Google Cloud, and they can use it now in a completely different way. They have some of the most innovative insurance services and products in the world. And it's a great example of a company facing that challenge head-on, embracing it, and saying, what are these new technologies? It was cloud before, it's been AI for a little while, and now it's Gen AI. How do we use these technologies to create new and exciting business experiences? There's also a big focus on attracting and retaining talent, and we see that a lot with many of our customers. In order to really benefit from these technologies, it's very important that you work with partners who really understand them for the potential, but as I say, also the responsible aspect. At Google, we talk about being bold and responsible, and it's the marrying these two things that is so important in the approach that you take to these new technologies. The last thing it would be very remiss of me not to touch on is obviously security and reg requirements. Now, some of the speeches I've listened to today have touched on this already. With the advent of generative AI, what does that mean for the fraud profile? What does that mean for the risk profile? When I worked at NatWest, I was a chief risk and compliance officer, so I have spent many years thinking about the interaction of customers, regulation, risk, and technology. And it's not easy. It's very important that you work with companies who are investing very heavily in cyber defense. At Google, all of the technology that we run on in Google Cloud benefits from the investment of the cyber technology we apply at an alphabet level. What that means is you're getting billions of dollars of security investment into your cloud and into your AI applications. It's very important that you protect that customer data and approach these technologies in a thoughtful way. So a few examples here, I won't go through them. Equifax I always think is a nice one, just in terms of scale. So, they use our cloud platform to query and deliver credit files from over 3 billion observations in under 100 milliseconds, which is one of those kind of brain explodes moments. But it's really incredible, and that is the benefit of the cloud. What it lets you do is ingest and analyze petabytes of data. I would have loved these tools when I was working in the industry for over 20 years. There's also really nice examples in things like BNY Mellon. They use that if you're more in the capital markets field to predict settlement failures with up to a 90% accuracy rate. But I really wanted to talk to you today about where we see the big opportunities for AI and generative AI within financial services. And it's a broad church. But the 3 core areas that we touch on, firstly, are driving growth through personalization and transforming distribution. When you first saw Gen AI come through, I'm sure that many of you thought, well, how could I make more human interactions? How do I personalize? How do I create that experience that is one-to-one, not one-to-many? How do I make my customer feel delighted and excited and engaged to create something that's a bit different, something that shows them the benefit of our relationship together? And you can use it in many of these different areas, segmenting your customers, understanding them better, conversational banking, but also things like investment portfolio construction and optimization. Again, thinking about these huge quantities of data and being able to analyze them and activate them to drive tangible business results. The second area is where a lot of customers start, non-customer facing applications. It's lower risk. We've talked already about regulation and the requirement to be really thoughtful about how you approach this technology. And some of these areas have enormous potential, and I'll go into some case studies in a minute. Financial document intelligence, Doc.ai, is something that has been well used across many markets for years. It really does improve it considerably, and you can get up to 95% accuracy in everything from an external document like a mortgage or a loan to internal documents like invoice processing. We have customers that do both. Another really important one here is developer productivity. Now, we had our Google Cloud Next conference in Las Vegas last week, and David Solomon, who is the CEO and chair of Goldman Sachs, spoke at that conference. And he focused specifically on this use case for Gen AI. I used to work at Goldman. It's a real engineering culture. And he estimates he can achieve up to 40% developer productivity enhancements through using Gen AI. That is a staggering statistic, and one that he would not have used at our very large-scale conference unless he was very sure that he could stand behind it. And the third area is risk and regulation. I'll come onto this a little bit because we've actually developed some specific AI tools in this space, particularly in relation to financial crime. But again, that focus on cyber, that focus on compliance, but also forecasting and risk modeling. When you're looking at value at risk, when you're looking at quant calculations, you want to be using high-performance compute. You'll be able to increase your calculations by up to 16 to 20 times the speed. And you can run almost innumerable what-if scenarios, testing where you could apply your capital, the benefit you will gain from it, the cost reductions. It's a really tangible business outcome. I'd also like to touch briefly on these foundations, and there's a lot of text on this slide, but the point really is it's very important to have the right foundations in place. I work with many customers who have excitement from the board level about what they can do with Gen AI, which is wonderful, but they have to have the right foundations in place to test and learn and use this technology in the right way. It takes time, it takes investment, it takes care, but the stack you end up with when you can apply cloud and AI and data analysis on top of it is really phenomenal. So let's just call out a couple of these examples, and then I'll double-click on them. Commerzbank is a customer I work with a lot. It's a large retail commercial bank in Germany, also operates across the continent. They use the document AI tool I referenced for about 50 million documents a year. They've seen huge benefits with it. Think about it like Google Photos. You scan the document, you extract the structured and unstructured data, run that through a rules engine and a content warehouse, and you have a digitized process. Cleaner, simpler, it can be assured and audited. Another nice example, which I'll double-click on, is TIAA, which is the Teachers Association Pension Fund in the US. They use our contact center AI, and that has been able to remove nearly 30% of the operating budget over a 5-year period. If you have a significant operating budget, that is a lot of money that's sitting on the table. You can use this technology to optimize. Now, just to double-click into a couple of AI examples that are particularly close to my heart, I didn't really want to not touch on this incredible work which we have done in partnership with HSBC. We are offering an AML AI product, consumable via an API. It is a one-of-a-kind, absolutely many award-winning product. And what we've done is look specifically at the transaction monitoring component, thinking about what are those transactions, how do they connect? Now, historically, and certainly when I was a CRO, we're relying on a rules-based system. Okay, so this many transactions, this many countries, touches a flag. And what that does is produce a suspicious activity report, which then requires a senior analyst to review it and be sent off, often with no action resulting from it. So it can be a really, really inefficient process. And what you see is a thousands of employees working on this kind of manual work, which isn't always the most rewarding work, because it's pretty labor intensive. Now, what we have done is applied a machine learning technology to effectively ingest that data. We don't see that data, we don't need to see that data, but the way the API works is it trains in the customer's tenant and identifies new patterns. It finds new instances of money laundering, ones that had not been detected before. HSBC and Jen very kindly shared a quote here today, thinks it has reduced her alert volume by more than 60%. And I can tell you that is at the conservative end of what we have achieved with this product. We have this live in multiple jurisdictions with HSBC around the world, all very highly regulated. And they're relying on this system, not the rules-based system going forward, because the outputs of it and the business value they can drive from it is just the next level. And I think it's a brilliant example of how you can use technology in the traditional industry of banking to drive better customer outcomes, attack a part of society that we all want to be fighting against. This is really AI for good. The next example is contact center AI. As I said, TIAA use this, and there's 3 aspects to consider. The first is virtual assistants. What that allows you to do is interact with customers 24/7. The second one is Agent Assist, which might sound like the more boring one, but I actually think it's the most exciting one. And what this does is, and I've sat in call centres in Greenock in Scotland with many colleagues over the years when I worked in retail banking, and they'd be toggling between like 7 different systems. And these people are incredible. If you want to have a humbling day, go and sit in a call centre, and you really do understand the complexity of data and how challenging retail banking can be. But what this does is analyze all of that data, harmonize it, and then bring insights real time to the agent. So when you call, you get personalized, relevant content from the person you're speaking to. You get relevant advice, it's on time, and they can see where you are today. Just what customers want right now. Personalized, digitized, just in time. We worked with a very large bank in Australia called Macquarie on this. And Luis, who's the CDO there, is an exceptional individual, used to be the CDO at BBVA, talked very openly about the fact when they did this, they obviously had to train it on the documentation of their products. And they had an unintended outcome, which was they actually discovered some of that documentation wasn't great. And they didn't really understand how their agents had been able to understand it. But the LLM tools could. And what that let them do was then go forward and say, okay, let's ring fence those documents, let's improve them, and then we're going to have a much better base of data going forward. And the third aspect is insights, and that's really about training, sentiment analysis, helping people understand how to serve customers better. Now, sitting here today, it wouldn't have been appropriate not to talk about a large fintech, and Revolut is a customer of ours on Google Cloud, a very important customer of ours. And they use us because of the scale and the power of the compute platform. We have a tool called BigQuery, which is an absolutely outstanding compute engine, and what it lets them do, again, is just run multiple simulations and huge amounts of data with the right cloud identity and access management. Again, please keep holding security in your mind. So having been excited about all of these wonderful opportunities ahead of us, I think it's very important also just to take a couple of minutes to talk about how to approach this. Now, AI and Gen AI is a complex area. Whoever you're working with, please do take these 5 factors into consideration. Firstly, the privacy of the data. Ensure your data is not going back to the source model to train it. When these models first came out, that was the case. Not with Google, but that was the case. The data that our customers put into these LM models never goes back to Google. It stays in the customer's tenant. It's trained on their data. That's a really, really important point for your customers, because it's just the right thing to do, apart from the fact the regulator will check it. Choice and value. This is a really key one. Bigger is not always better. We have tiny models, one we call Gecko, very Google, and then we have a huge model that we call Bison. And actually, these models cost money to run, right? So once you've identified what you want to do, make sure you're sizing the model correctly to answer the question. You'll save yourself time, money, and it's better from a sustainability perspective. Grounding, that's really the most key thing we're talking about here in a highly regulated industry. Making sure that you can get through those 3 lines of defense review. Can you assure the outputs of your Gen AI, of your AI, of your models? And then can you audit them? And can you reach a standard as we have with our AML AI product where the regulator is signing off on it? Think about your grounding. Whoever you work with, push that. Make sure that is in the right place. The good news is, it's quite easy to trial. Okay, so once you've got your data in cloud, you can test and learn lots of things. We have customers with 700 use cases, some with 70. Everyone goes through that journey, but test and learn is pretty simple. And then lastly, again, security. I can't say it enough today. It's incredibly important with the advent of these new technologies that we lean into it as a collective, as a community. I'm very fortunate working across Europe, and often I had the chance to speak at the European Commission as an example in January, and we talked a lot about this. How are the regulators thinking about this? How can we lean in as a community and educate each other as we go? Everyone is learning. The regulators are learning too. So lean in, spend time with them, make sure you're all having the right conversations. We have a set of AI principles. I won't go through them all, but key things that have come through already today in some of the speeches. Not reinforcing unfair bias or creating bias, in fact. Make sure that we're accountable to communities, to people. Do the right thing. And on the counter side of that, there's things that we simply won't do. So we had the ability to put in place facial recognition software many years ago, and we did not. It's important that however you apply these technologies passes that principle and morality test. And we run these committees every week on new and existing products. It's part of our DNA. And lastly, I'll just leave you with this very practical slide. I don't know if the slides are circulated afterwards. If you want to take a photo, please do. Really what I wanted to do is talk about how responsible AI can be put into action. So define your problem. You might not need AI to solve it, okay? So go through it with your partners, be it Google, be it another company. What's the intended user? What are the risks? What does good look like? Then collect and prepare your data. Garbage in, garbage out. Saying's been around a long time for a good reason. Make sure your training data is collected, sampled, and labeled correctly. Make sure there is no inherent bias within it, and make sure your privacy controls are in place. Thirdly, train it, right? How was your model trained? Who did it? Has it been debugged? And what are its limitations? AI and Gen AI cannot do everything. So test that, challenge it, be challenging in your application. And then evaluate the outcomes. How did it test? Was it stable? Was it performing? Do you feel it's trustworthy? When you go through your product committees, when you go through your 3 lines of defense, is everyone nodding in the room saying, I think this works? Is everyone comfortable? It could be signed off from a regulatory perspective. And then lastly, integrate and monitor. So think about if it's behaving as expected and continually test and learn. The last thing I will say in closing is that this technology represents an incredible opportunity for financial services and ultimately for consumers across the UK and globally. But it is the combination of human insight and human oversight with the technology that will bring the benefits. It needs to be approached in a bold way, but also a responsible way. And I hope I have given you food for thought for that this afternoon. Thank you very much.